When I met my fiancé's parents, his mom threw wine in my face saying, "That's to disinfect a poor girl. Pay $200,000 to marry my son." My fiancé laughed. I smiled and said something that destroyed them. What I said next changed everything. "I'm canceling all business with your company." The color drained from Judith Walker's face as she realized who I really was. I'm Amanda Hayes, 28, and I've built a $15 million tech company from absolutely nothing. What the Walker family didn't know was that my company provided the critical software infrastructure that kept their manufacturing empire running. They were about to learn that humiliating the wrong person comes with a very expensive price tag. Let me back up. 5 years ago, I was coding in a studio apartment, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. My parents were immigrants who cleaned offices at night, so I could focus on my computer science degree at MIT. While my classmates partied with trust fund money, I was building something they couldn't understand, a supply chain software platform that would revolutionize mid-size manufacturing. By year 2, I had 20 employees and $2 million in revenue. By year 4, we'd expanded to 3 offices with over 100 staff members. Last year, we hit $15 million in annual revenue, and I personally cleared $2 million. Not bad for someone whose parents once earned minimum wage. I met Ethan Walker at a financial technology conference in Boston. He was tall, charming, with an easy confidence that came from never doubting his place in the world. When he approached me after my presentation on predictive supply chain analytics, I was impressed by his thoughtful questions about scalability and market penetration. He seemed genuinely fascinated by what I'd built, asking about technical architecture and business models with the kind of focused attention that made me feel truly seen. Our 18-month relationship had been a dream. Ethan supported my late nights at the office, celebrated every company milestone, and seemed proud to introduce me as his brilliant entrepreneur girlfriend. When he proposed 3 months ago with his grandmother's emerald ring, I didn't hesitate to say yes. But here's what I should have paid attention to. Ethan always described his mother as particular and his father as traditional. When I pressed for details about meeting them, he'd wave it off, saying, "Mom just needs time to warm up to people. She'll love you once she gets to know you." What he failed to mention was that the Walker family owned Walker Industries, one of the oldest manufacturing companies on the East Coast. They produce specialized components for aerospace and defense contractors, with annual revenues approaching $200 million. More importantly for my story, 6 months before Ethan's proposal, my company had secured a crucial contract with Walker Industries worth $3 million annually, about 20% of our revenue. The irony was perfect. I'd been working with Walker Industries' IT department and procurement team for months, helping them modernize their entire inventory management system. I knew their business inside and out, but I'd never connected their company to Ethan's family. The procurement team knew me as Amanda Hayes, CEO of TechFlow Solutions. The Walkers knew me as Ethan's girlfriend from a middle-class background. As dinner with Ethan's parents approached, I prepared like I was pitching to Fortune 500 executives. I researched proper etiquette, bought a conservative navy dress that cost more than my first laptop, and practiced small talk about art, travel, and philanthropy. Ethan kept reassuring me that I was overthinking it, but something in his nervous energy suggested even he wasn't entirely confident about how the evening would go. The Walker estate sat at the end of a private drive in Beacon Hill, a Georgian mansion that screamed old money. Walking through the massive front door, I stepped into a foyer larger than my first apartment, complete with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than most people's cars. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of Walkers looking down with the same confident expression I recognized from Ethan. Judith Walker appeared like she was making an entrance at a charity gala. Late 50s, impeccably dressed in Chanel, with Ethan's hazel eyes and a smile that seemed practiced rather than genuine. Her handshake was brief, her fingers barely touching mine, and her assessment of me from head to toe was anything but subtle. "And you must be Amanda," she said, her tone suggesting she'd been expecting someone disappointing. "How lovely to finally meet you. Ethan has told us so little about you." The emphasis on little wasn't accidental. Richard Walker offered a warmer greeting, but even his friendliness felt cautious, like he was following his wife's lead on how welcoming to be. The interrogation began immediately. Judith wanted to know about my family background, my father's profession as a high school teacher, my mother's work as a school librarian before she passed away 3 years ago. She said teacher, like someone might say convicted felon. And when I mentioned there was no trust fund or inheritance, she actually nodded, as if this confirmed her worst suspicions. "No family money, then?" she asked directly. "No trust fund or inheritance?" When I explained that I'd built my company from nothing, she waved dismissively. "Yes, Ethan mentioned you have some sort of computer business." "Tech solutions, actually," I corrected. "We develop specialized software for supply chain management. In fact, my company has been working with Walker Industries for the past 6 months. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I wasn't aware of that." "The new inventory system being implemented. That's our platform," I explained, hoping this would establish some common ground. "I see. Well, I leave those details to our managers." Dinner was a masterclass in subtle humiliation. Judith corrected my posture, criticized my voice as a bit loud for dinner conversation, and found fault with everything from how I held my fork to the way I complimented their home. Each criticism came with a tight smile, as if she were doing me a favor by pointing out my inadequacies. The conversation topics were clearly tests. Country club memberships I didn't have, charity board positions I'd never sought, social connections I'd never needed. When I mentioned my company's scholarship program for underprivileged students, she called it quaint. Then came the children question. "Have you given any thought to children? The Walker line is quite important." "We haven't discussed timing yet," I said carefully. "I'd like to ensure my company is stable first." Judith's face hardened. "A mother's primary responsibility is to her children, not her hobby." "My company isn't a hobby," I replied. "We employ over 100 people." 100 people dependent on you," she interrupted. "How will you possibly manage that and properly raise Walker heirs?" I looked to Ethan for support, but he was suddenly fascinated by his roast beef. As dessert arrived, Judith took a sip of her wine and looked directly at me. "Let's be frank, Amanda. You seem enterprising, but the Walker family has certain standards. Ethan holds a position in society that requires a suitable partner." "I believe I am suitable," I said quietly. "Do you?" Without warning, she flung the contents of her wine glass directly into my face. Red wine splashed across my cheeks and dripped onto my navy dress. I gasped, too shocked to move. "That's to disinfect a poor girl," she said calmly, as if throwing wine at dinner guests was perfectly normal. "If you want to marry my son, you'll need to contribute a $200,000 dowry to the Walker Family Trust. Consider it an entrance fee." Then came the moment that still makes my blood boil. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. "Mom has her ways," he said, handing me his napkin like this was all perfectly reasonable. "She did the same thing to my cousin's wife." Richard looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Judith explained it as a family tradition, as if demanding payment for the privilege of marriage was as normal as saying grace before dinner. "The Walker family doesn't marry down without compensation," she continued. "Your business may be successful now, but startups are notoriously unstable. The dowry ensures you're committed to the family, not just to Ethan's trust fund." I sat there, wine dripping down my face, processing what had just happened. The woman had literally thrown wine at me and demanded I pay $200,000 for the privilege of marrying her son. Even worse, my fiancé thought this was amusing rather than absolutely unforgivable. That's when my strategic mind kicked in. I've built a multi-million-dollar company by staying calm under pressure and thinking several moves ahead. While Judith was smugly explaining her family's traditions, I was calculating exactly how much leverage I had over their lives. I dabbed the wine from my face and smiled. Not a defeated smile, not an angry smile, but the same smile I wore when competitors underestimated what TechFlow Solutions could do. "Mrs. Walker," I said, my voice completely calm, "I think there's something you should know about my little computer business." Her condescending smile faltered slightly. My company, TechFlow Solutions, isn't just any tech startup. We're the company that's been modernizing Walker Industries' entire supply chain infrastructure for the past 6 months. That $3 million annual contract you signed, that's with me. The change in her expression was immediate. Confusion, then recognition, then something approaching panic. Your entire inventory management system, your production scheduling, your vendor coordination, it all runs on software my team built specifically for Walker Industries. Remove our platform and your company would be back to managing everything with spreadsheets and phone calls. Ethan was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Amanda, what are you talking about?" I kept my eyes on Judith. "I'm talking about the fact that your mother just threw wine at the person who keeps her company running efficiently. I'm talking about the fact that she demanded $200,000 from someone whose business expertise is literally holding Walker Industries together." Richard spoke up for the first time all evening. "Amanda, surely we can discuss this like adults." "We could have," I replied. "But adults don't throw wine at their guests and demand dowries like we're living in medieval times." I stood up, wine still staining my dress, and looked directly at Judith. "I want to be absolutely clear about something, Mrs. Walker. I don't need your family's money, connections, or social status. I built a $15 million company from nothing. Last year alone, I personally earned $2 million. Her face was getting paler by the second. "But you need me. Your company's entire operational efficiency depends on TechFlow Solutions. Our contract renewal comes up for review in 3 months. Given tonight's events, I think it's time for Walker Industries to find a new vendor." "Now wait just a minute," Richard started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. That $200,000 dowry you wanted, I spend more than that on office catering every year. But the principle matters. I don't pay bribes, I don't buy my way into families, and I certainly don't reward people who treat me like I'm not good enough to breathe their air." Judith finally found her voice. "You can't be serious. You're ending a business relationship over a family tradition?" "I'm ending a business relationship because you demonstrated that you're exactly the kind of people I don't want to do business with. People who abuse their power, who think their money makes them better than everyone else, and who clearly don't understand the concept of mutual respect." I turned to Ethan, who looked like he was watching his entire world collapse. "And I'm ending a personal relationship with someone who thinks his mother's behavior is acceptable, who laughs when I'm being humiliated, and who apparently sees nothing wrong with his family demanding payment for the privilege of marriage." I pulled off his grandmother's emerald ring and set it on the table. "I'm sure your next girlfriend's family will be wealthy enough to meet your mother's standards. Mine certainly are, but I have better things to spend my money on than buying respect from people who don't deserve it." The silence that followed was deafening. Judith opened and closed her mouth like a fish. Richard stared at his hands, and Ethan looked between his family and me with growing panic. "Amanda, please," Ethan started. "We can work this out. Mom didn't mean—" "Your mother meant every word," I interrupted. "And so do I. TechFlow Solutions will begin transitioning Walker Industries to a new vendor immediately. Our legal team will handle the contract termination details." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. "Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Walker. It was incredibly educational." As I called an Uber from their driveway, I could hear raised voices through the mansion's windows. 30 years of strategic planning doesn't prepare you for losing 20% of your annual revenue in a single dinner conversation. but I had advantages they didn't know about. The next morning, I was in my office by 6 a.m., calling my business partner and COO, Maria Gonzalez. "We need an emergency board meeting," I told her. "The Walker situation just became a complete termination." "Jesus, Amanda, what happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version, focusing on the business implications rather than the personal humiliation. Maria's response was immediate. "Those entitled assholes. What do we need to do?" That's why I love working with Maria. No drama, no questions about whether I was overreacting, just straight to problem-solving mode. By 9 a.m., our entire leadership team was in the conference room. Maria, our CFO David Thompson, our head of sales Rebecca Foster, and our chief legal counsel Victoria Stone. I laid out the situation in stark business terms. Walker Industries represents $3 million in annual revenue, I began. We have 90 days to replace that income, or we're looking at layoffs and delayed expansion plans. David pulled up our financial projections. We can absorb a 20% revenue hit for about 6 months before it gets critical. But if we can secure 2 major clients at $2 million each, we'd actually be in better shape than before. Rebecca was already pulling up her prospect list. Meridian Global has been circling us for 8 months. They're Walker's biggest competitor, and they've been frustrated with their current vendor. If I tell them we have immediate availability, I bet I can get a $2 a million contract signed within 30 days. "What about Frost Technologies?" Maria asked. "They reached out last quarter about expanding their system." "Even better," Rebecca replied. Frost's CFO hates Walker Industries, something about a bidding war they lost 3 years ago. If word gets out that we're available because we fired Walker, Frost will probably offer us premium rates just for spite. Victoria was reviewing our Walker contract. "This is actually perfect timing," she said. "They've been requesting modifications that weren't in the original scope, basically demanding free additional services. We have grounds to terminate for cause, which means no penalties and immediate cessation of services." I felt my confidence returning. This wasn't just about losing a client. It was about demonstrating to my entire team that TechFlow Solutions operates on principles, not desperation. "There's something else," I continued. "I want a complete forensic review of Walker Industries' business practices. If Judith Walker is willing to abuse her position for personal vendettas, I want to know what other ethical corners they're cutting." David raised an eyebrow. "That's going to cost about $50,000 for a thorough investigation." "Do it, and I want everything documented. Their accounting practices, labor relations, vendor treatment, regulatory compliance, everything." Over the next 3 days, my team executed with military precision. Rebecca had preliminary agreements with both Meridian Global and Frost Technologies. David restructured our financial projections, showing stronger revenue diversification. Victoria prepared ironclad contract termination documents, and our hired forensic accountants began uncovering some very interesting patterns in Walker Industries' business practices. Meanwhile, Ethan was calling and texting nonstop. His messages evolved from confused to frustrated to increasingly desperate. "I don't understand why you're so upset," to "You're overreacting to Mom's personality," to "Please don't destroy our relationship over one dinner." What he didn't understand was that the relationship had been destroyed the moment he laughed at his mother throwing wine in my face. Judith called too, her tone shifting from condescending to businesslike to barely controlled panic as she realized the implications of losing TechFlow's services. "Amanda, dear," she said in a voicemail that made my skin crawl, "I hope you're not making any hasty business decisions based on personal emotions. Perhaps we could meet to discuss things like professionals." I had Victoria return her call. "Ms. Hayes has asked me to handle all communications with Walker Industries going forward. We'll be in touch regarding contract termination procedures." The investigation results came back faster than expected. Walker Industries had a pattern of questionable practices, unexplained payments to shell companies, consistent underreporting of workplace safety incidents, and a history of retaliating against vendors who crossed the family personally. Most damning was evidence of tax avoidance schemes that pushed the boundaries of legality. But the real leverage came from understanding their operational vulnerability. Without our software platform, Walker Industries would lose approximately 25% of their operational efficiency. Their production schedules would become chaotic. Their inventory management would revert to systems they'd abandoned 3 years ago, and their vendor coordination would require hiring at least a dozen additional staff members. More importantly, their biggest client, Northrop Aerospace, had contract clauses requiring certain operational efficiency standards. Without TechFlow's platform, Walker Industries would struggle to meet those requirements, potentially losing contracts worth $40 million annually. I was sitting on a nuclear option, and Judith Walker had handed me the detonator. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after the wine-throwing incident, I received a text from Ethan. "Mom wants to have lunch. She's ready to apologize and discuss the dowry situation reasonably," I texted back. Too late. Meridian Global signed this morning. It was true. Rebecca had closed the deal that morning for $2 million annually, 30% more than Walker had been paying. Frost Technologies was scheduled to sign on Monday for another $2 million. Not only were we replacing Walker's revenue, we were improving our financial position significantly. Ethan called immediately. "Amanda, you can't be serious. This affects both our families." "It affects your family," I corrected. "My family is doing just fine. My company is more successful than ever, and I'm free of people who think my worth is measured in dowry payments." "But I love you." "You love the idea of me, Ethan. You love having a successful girlfriend to show off, but you don't actually respect me. If you respected me, you would have defended me when your mother threw wine in my face. Instead, you laughed." That afternoon, Victoria hand-delivered our contract termination notice to Walker Industries. The legal language was crystal clear. TechFlow Solutions was ending all business relationships with Walker Industries, effective immediately, citing material breaches of professional conduct and requested contract modifications outside the scope of original agreements. The termination was structured to cause maximum operational disruption. Our platform would be deactivated at 5 p.m. on Friday, giving them exactly 24 hours to prepare for reverting to their old systems. It was perfectly legal and absolutely devastating. Richard Walker called me personally that evening. "Amanda, I want to apologize for my wife's behavior. Is there any way we can salvage our business relationship?" "Mr. Walker, your wife threw wine in my face and demanded $200,000 for the privilege of marrying your son. She then attempted to use our business relationship to coerce me into paying. That's not a personality quirk. That's abuse of power. I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset, Mr. Walker. I'm successful. There's a difference. Upset people make emotional decisions. Successful people make strategic ones." Friday at 5 p.m., our platform went dark for Walker Industries. I spent the evening at our company celebration dinner, toasting our new contracts with Meridian Global and Frost Technologies. My team had rallied around our principles, worked overtime to secure new business, and demonstrated that TechFlow Solutions thrived when we refused to compromise our values. That weekend, I got texts and calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Ethan's brother, his cousin, even his sister-in-law Jennifer reached out asking me to reconsider. Apparently, Walker Industries was in chaos. Their production schedules were collapsing, vendor coordination was breaking down, and they were scrambling to hire temporary staff to manually handle processes our software had automated. But the call that mattered came from Richard Walker on Sunday evening. His voice sounded exhausted. "Amanda, I need you to know that I've asked Judith to move out. What she did was inexcusable, and I've enabled her behavior for too long." I was genuinely surprised. Mr. Walker, this was about business principles, not your marriage. Maybe that's true for you, but seeing your courage to stand up to her made me realize I've been a coward for 30 years. She's driven away good people, hurt our family relationships, and now she's damaged our business. I'm 62 years old, and I just watched a 28-year-old demonstrate more integrity than I've shown in decades. I appreciate you saying that, but our business relationship is still terminated. I understand. I just wanted you to know that your actions had consequences beyond what you intended. Good consequences. Over the next month, the ripple effects continued. Walker Industries' operational problems caused delays in their aerospace contracts. Judith's attempts to badmouth TechFlow Solutions backfired when other business owners shared their own stories about her entitled behavior. 2 of Walker Industries' other vendors terminated their contracts, apparently tired of dealing with Judith's condescension and unreasonable demands. Meanwhile, TechFlow Solutions was thriving. Our new contracts with Meridian Global and Frost Technologies led to referrals with 3 other companies. We were able to hire 12 new employees and accelerate our expansion into the Seattle market. Our quarterly revenue was up 35% compared to the previous year. The forensic accounting report I'd commissioned proved even more valuable than expected. When Frost Technologies' legal team mentioned during contract negotiations that Walker Industries was under investigation for tax avoidance schemes, it became clear that switching vendors was the smartest decision they'd made all year. Ethan made one last attempt at reconciliation, showing up at my office 6 weeks after the dinner disaster. He looked genuinely humbled, carrying flowers and what appeared to be a prepared speech. Amanda, I've been seeing a therapist. I'm starting to understand how dysfunctional my family dynamics are. Mom's behavior was unacceptable, and my reaction was worse. I laughed because I was nervous, not because I thought it was funny. Part of me felt sorry for him. The confident man I'd fallen in love with had been replaced by someone who seemed genuinely lost. I'm glad you're getting help, Ethan, but we can't go back. What if things change? What if I stand up to her the way you did? Then do it for yourself, not to win me back. Real growth doesn't happen to impress someone else. As he left, I felt the last remnants of what we'd had finally dissolve. The relationship had been built on a false foundation. His image of me as someone who would eventually conform to his family's expectations, and my belief that he respected me as an equal. 6 months later, I received the most satisfying validation of all. Jennifer, Ethan's sister-in-law, reached out to tell me she'd enrolled in business school, something Judith had forbidden for years. 2 other Walker family members had quietly reached out for advice about starting their own ventures, inspired by my example of refusing to accept unacceptable treatment. You showed us that we didn't have to accept being treated like employees instead of family members, Jennifer told me over coffee. Watching you walk away from all that money and social status just to maintain your dignity, it changed how I saw myself. At our company's annual celebration last month, I stood before 150 employees in our expanded headquarters, looking out at a team that had rallied around principles rather than profit margins. TechFlow Solutions had not only survived losing 20% of our revenue, we'd used the crisis to become stronger, more diversified, and more profitable than ever. Success isn't just about building something valuable, I told them. It's about refusing to devalue yourself in the process. Sometimes the most important business decision you'll make is walking away from the wrong opportunity, the wrong partnership, or the wrong relationship. The $200,000 dowry Judith Walker had demanded? I donated that exact amount to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing technology degrees. The scholarship is named after my parents, who taught me that self-respect isn't for sale at any price. Today, TechFlow Solutions generates $22 million in annual revenue. We have 180 employees across 4 offices. Last month, Forbes featured me in their 30 Under 30 list for technology entrepreneurs. The article mentioned that I built the company while maintaining strict ethical standards, noting that we've never compromised our principles for short-term profit. Walker Industries, on the other hand, lost 3 major contracts and had to lay off 40 employees. Richard and Judith divorced, and she now lives in a much smaller house. Her social influence dramatically reduced. Ethan moved to California and married someone from an appropriately wealthy family. I heard through mutual contacts that his new mother-in-law is even worse than Judith was. Sometimes people ask if I regret walking away from the Walker family's wealth and connections. The question always surprises me. I never needed their money, their social status, or their approval. I needed their respect, and that was the one thing they couldn't afford to give. The wine stain never came out of that navy dress. I kept it hanging in my closet as a reminder that my dignity isn't for sale, not for $200,000, not for any amount. True wealth isn't measured by what you're willing to pay to be accepted. It's measured by what you're willing to walk away from to remain yourself.